Alright, welcome back to this new recipe. Today we're going to make this cake with hazelnut, apricot and rosemary. So let's start going through all of the ingredients. Let's start with this sponge cake that only has eggs. So the ingredients are eggs, brown sugar, honey, hazelnut, almond, flour, praline or hazelnut paste, and hazelnut and gianduja. And what is gianduja is just this mix of praline with milk chocolate that we're going to put on top of the sponge cake. So the first thing we're going to do is just heat up the eggs a little bit. Let's put them in this bowl. Along with the sugar and the honey. And the first thing we're going to do is, once this is well mixed, in order for the eggs to not burn, we're going to mix and dissolve the sugar with the eggs. So with that same whisk, we're going to mix and we're going to heat them up in the microwave approximately to 40 degrees so that the sugar is completely dissolved. And then we're going to put them in this mixing bowl. This way, if they are a bit warm, they're going to work better in the mixer. Aside, we're going to preheat the oven at 180 degrees. And what we're going to do after this, we're going to put the almond, the hazelnut and the flour in the food processor, and we're going to grind those. So this is done, this is ready. Let's put them in the mixer, all of these ingredients. And start mixing. On the other side, we've got this food processor. Let's put the flour, the almond powder, and the toasted hazelnuts inside. We can see how the mixer is doing very well. We also have our mix, which we are going to sift, just to make sure that we don't have big chunks. And start sieving. All right, that's done. Lastly, the dry ingredients and our praline or hazelnut paste. That's completely up to you. Now let's prepare our 16 centimeter rings, which is lined with cling film. And look at this, they have so much volume now. So let's put all of the dry ingredients at once in the mixer. They're mixed, and the last thing. And let's grab a little part of that mix with the praline to create a first mix. Mixed completely, and now we can just add it with the rest of the mix. Don't worry if you lose a little bit of volume, because that's going to be inevitable. It's a very smooth sponge cake. And now we're going to take a scale to see the exact amount that we must put in our molds. We're going to use approximately 200 grams of sponge cake in each mold. That's perfect. The oven is ready, and after this we're going to bake it for 7 to 8 minutes. We also want some humidity inside of the oven. So let's put 200 grams inside each mold. And that's it. As you see, we have calculated very good the initial amount of ingredients. And once we've got this inside, let's put the gianduja. Hazelnut gianduja. Very good. All right, and that's it. So now let's take this to the oven and bake it for 8 minutes. A little bit of humidity inside, and I'll see you in just a little bit. All right, let's continue with the next elaboration. And now we're going to make a toffee with salt schemes and vanilla. So the first thing we're going to do is just open this vanilla pot. Lots of people ask me, how do you do this? Just use this Small tip from this paring knife: cut the vanilla pot, open it like this, just with your hands, and with the side of the knife, just press and grab all of the vanilla beans from the inside. So let's put all of these vanilla pots in a bowl, and the cream we're also going to put that with the vanilla beans, and we're going to heat this up. First, just use your whisk to mix it a little bit. So we're starting to dissolve those vanilla beans, and we're going to take this to boil. I'm going to leave that for 1 minute in the microwave. So the ingredients are butter, gelatin mass. Remember, it is just gelatin which we have hydrated, sugar, and a little bit of salt scales, fleur de sel or salt scales. So let's turn this on, and we're going to start to make our toffee. Aside, I've got some things prepared right here. I've got this measuring jar, a guitar sheet. I've got everything that I need to make my toffee. So let's start. How do we do this? Very slowly, we're going to start sprinkling in the sugar inside the saucepan. Very little by little, waiting for it to caramelize. And there's people that say that you shouldn't use a spatula. There's people that say that you do. My opinion is that you should be using the spatula. Don't touch it too much so we don't add any air, but we can't add the caramel. We can just stir it a little bit to help it dissolve. We can see how the crystals are starting to melt, so we can just go on and continue adding sugar. And on top of the melted sugar, we're going to continue adding more sugar and continue making our caramel. Let's continue adding. You see that I haven't used a spatula yet, but I'm just moving the saucepan like this. Now we can take back our cream from the microwave. And I will grab my gelatin mass and put it with the cream. In the end, I didn't use the spatula as you saw. Just by playing around with the saucepan, we can make the caramel. So when should we stop the heat? That's completely up to you if you want it more toasted or not, but minimum you should not be able to see any crystals. It should be kind of a goldish, orangey color. It shouldn't make any foam or turn into a dark brown color, because that means you're burning the caramel. So now we're going to deglaze this caramel by adding the cream very little by little and mixing and whisking with the whisk.
Retiramos toda la vainilla que nos queda aquí en el bol. Acabamos de mezclar.
Make sure that you take all of the vanilla out of the bowl and continue mixing.
¿Sí? Perfecto. Entonces lo voy a dejar por aquí, voy a retirar la inducción de la mesa.
Now just remove it from the heat, clear the table. And the first thing we're going to do now is to cool down our caramel. To do so, we can use this silk pad. And if we even wanted to take more care, we could put this tray underneath. Let's put all of the toffee right here and spread it out. This way we're cooling it down. We're going to take it to 40 degrees and we could just leave it on the table for 1 minute. But we can also use some cling film. And let's take it for just a second to the blast freezer.
Y lo que vamos a hacer ahora es vamos a incorporarlo. Vamos a poner el toffee aquí. Entonces, con ayuda de una espátula, también me voy a poner unos guantes. Vamos a recoger un poquito la mesa. Limpiamos un poquito y lo que vamos a hacer ahora es mixarlo.
And now what we're going to do is mix it with the butter, which we have here prepared.
Y lo vamos a retirar del abatidor, porque esto tenía que ser muy muy rápido. Quitamos
Let's take it out of the blast freezer.
el film,
Take the cling film
recuperamos de una pieza, ¿sí?
like this,
Cerramos el film
close it
y lo que vamos a hacer es
and just press down
este caramelo.
like this.
¿Sí?
This way we make sure that we get back all of the caramel that was stuck in the cling film.
Ponemos la vaina de vainilla,
Let's also take out this vanilla pot.
lo que le pueda quedar. Y ahora, con ayuda de una espátula, vamos a recoger
And now with a spatula,
nuestro caramelo
let's just
y lo vamos a
pick
poner
it
en la
up
jarra.
and let's put it
Con cuidado,
in this measuring jar.
en un bol más grande
We
también.
could also put it in another bowl.
Como se sienta cómodo cada uno. Esto
Whatever you like. Just make sure that you take everything back.
perfecto. Ya lo tenemos. Entonces, vamos a recuperar ya todo. Perfecto. Y vamos a colocar la mantequilla.
And we're going to put the butter
Mix, un blender.
and then use a blender.
Recordamos que el toffee tiene que estar
Remember that the toffee should be at 40 degrees, the butter at room temperature.
en emulsión.
This way we will get a good emulsion.
Con ayuda de un turmix. Vamos a incorporar
And start blending.
y ya tenemos ese ese caramelo que casi parece dulce de leche, ¿eh?
And we've got our caramel.
Caramelo a la vainilla,
Amazing vanilla caramel
a la flor de sal.
with salt scales.
Hacer es limpiar bien
So now let's use a spatula to clean the blender. This way we make sure that we're taking all of the recipe with us.
que no nos quede, que no tengamos mucha merma. Y todo lo que tenemos aquí alrededor, sí, lo vamos a mezclar.
And also, when you do this kind of processes, make sure that you clean the sides of the jar or the bowl to make sure that there are no pieces left unmixed on the sides. And look at this texture, amazing texture.
Por último, flor de sal o
Lastly, the salt scales
camas
or fleur de sel,
a gusto, ¿eh?
as much as you want.
Perfecto. Muy bien, pues ya lo tenemos. Ahora lo que vamos a hacer es colocar nuestro tofe. Yo lo voy a colocar en un contenedor como
So what I'm going to do now is just pour all of our toffee
sea bien
in this container.
y ya tenemos nuestro tofe.
And we've got our toffee done.
Perfecto. Y entonces vamos a colocar una tapita y se recomienda dejar.
And so it is done.
Recordamos que lleva gelatina.
Let's put the lid on and we're going to leave it 6 hours in the fridge so the gelatin activates, and we'll use it later. Let's continue with our recipe, and now let's make this hazelnut cremo. It's similar to a namelaka, and what is it? It is just a very creamy and smooth mix made with gelatin. Alright, let's continue with our recipes. And now let's continue with our hazelnut cake. And now we're going to make this cremant. For this case, we have chosen a namelaka style recipe. So the ingredients are milk chocolate, praline, cream, glucose, gelatin mass, milk, and a little bit of salt. So how are we going to do this? The first thing we're going to do is put the melted chocolate at 40 to 45 degrees in this jar. Our hazelnut paste. And the hazelnut praline.
Muy bien, una vez tengamos todo esto a punto, lo que vamos a hacer ahora es colocar en la olla la leche.
So now after this, we're going to put the milk in the saucepan, the glucose,
muy poquita glucosa, y la gelatina.
and the gelatin. We've got it right here. And we're going to take this to 45 degrees, only until the gelatin is completely melted. The melting point for the gelatin is 40 to 45 degrees, so when we see that the gelatin is completely melted, that means we reached the temperature. So we've got this. Let's clear the table. And now let's put first the milk. And start emulsifying. And once this is emulsified, what we're going to do is add the cold cream straight out of the fridge. Now once it's done, Let's repeat the same process as before. Use the spatula to clean the blender and take it out.
Vamos a acabar ya de limpiar nuestra jarra con nuestra namelaca. Y una vez ya tengamos todo el conjunto, un poquito de sal.
And once we've got all of the mixture, we're going to put some salt, which is always very good because it boosts those flavors inside.
Os invito a probar, ¿no? De poner un puntito de sal dentro de las elaboraciones. Nos va a potenciar todo lo que es el sabor.
So,
Pues ya tenemos listo.
our caramel is done, our cremant is done,
Y lo que vamos a hacer ahora es colocar
and now we're just going to put some cling film,
contacto
making sure that it touches the surface.
y con esto
And with that,
dejar
let's leave it to cool down for at least 6 hours.
un día de antelación
Just try to make it the day before
para utilizar
that you are going to use it, and I'll see you in the next recipe.
una receta.
Let's continue. We've got our sponge cakes ready.
A puntito para salir del horno y nos vamos a colocar los guantes.
I just put these gloves on and let's see this amazing sponge cake.
Espectacular bizcocho de
8 minutes in the oven,
8 minutos al horno,
completely cooked, and
pero sobre todo que no
most important thing, just don't overcook it. It's going to be a very good sponge cake. And now we're just going to use a spatula,
de una espátula
just press around it just to make sure that it detaches from the mold.
y lo vamos a colocar en el batidor. Perfecto.
And just like that, we're going to put this in the blast freezer. And after this, we're going to prepare the hazelnut crunch.
El crujiente de avellana. Nos vemos en un instante. Continuamos con nuestra tarta de avellanas, albaricoques y romero. Y lo
Alright, let's continue with our rosemary, apricot, and hazelnut cake.
chocolate, leche,
And now let's make this crunch
paliete, royaltín,
with hazelnut paste, pailleté, royaltine, hazelnut paste,
ralladura y
lemon zest,
o flor de
and a little bit of salt. The first thing,
chocolate
let's put
fundido a 40 grados,
the chocolate,
como máximo,
which is melted at 40 to 45 degrees,
praline de avellanas,
our hazelnut praline,
praline de avellanas, pasta de avellanas,
our hazelnut paste,
y mezclamos el conjunto,
and mix all of this,
añadimos
all of the fats.
esto,
We can now add a little bit of salt. It's
paliete,
completely up to you.
mezclamos
Pailleté, mix,
y ralladura de limón,
and some lemon zest.
que esto con el albaricoque, la mezcla de
This will work very good with the apricot.
está muy
Lemon with hazelnut is very, very good. So now
que hayamos elaborado.
I will go get this sponge cake that we just made,
Vamos a colocar
and we're going to put some acetate all around it.
el acetato que tenemos preparado y lo vamos con una
And I will show you now what we will do with this acetate, because once we remove the sponge cake, we're going to use that same mold. This way it will be easier to unmold later. If I just put it right on top, it just gets stuck. So let's go get our scale and let's divide the crunch. Let's put 90 grams in each. Well, let's say 100 grams per sponge cake. And now let's take a spatula spread it out.
Mucho cuidado, que llegue a las esquinas.
Very carefully, make sure that it gets to every corner.
Y nada, pues nos vamos a llevar el crujiente al abatidor y
And let's take this to the blast freezer and leave it there until it freezes completely. Let's continue with our cake, and now we're going to make these chocolate decorations. We have prepared these 18 centimeter rings, some acetate, and we're going to make it very, very simple. I've got my tray right here, these two acetate strips, and the first thing, we're going to spray some grease on the table, just a little bit, not too much. And this is going to help us to stick these acetate strips. Let's put some chocolate on top of each strip. Again, don't put too much. And then use this spatula and spread it out like this. And that's it. It is this simple to make some chocolate decorations. Now let's take the acetate and we're going to place them right here on the side. Let's take the other one. And now we're going to leave them to crystallize. And what's left on the table, just pick it up, and we can't just use that any other time. Also, clean the table. Just you have to make sure that you are always working on clean surfaces. You're using clean spatulas, clean bowls. Let's see if it has crystallized. So now let's cut thinner strips, 2 centimeter strips. And with that, we're going to have our first chocolate decoration. We can use some tape to make sure that it stays in place. And voila, that's it. We're going to leave them to crystallize between 6 to 12 hours. And I'll see you in the assembly. Let's continue with our next recipe. And now we're going to make this apricot gel. To do so, we have prepared this diced apricot. We can use canned fruit, or we can rehydrate some apricots with warm water the night before. And the next day we strain those and coat them in dices. This way we will find those chunks inside of our gel. Apricot puree, passion fruit puree, lemon zest, gelatin mass, NH pectin, sugar, and citric acid. Aside, we also have some vanilla, which we are going to open just like we did before. Like this. All along the pot. Then we open it. The combination with vanilla and apricot I love. And we can just store the rest for any other recipe. So let's put the sugar in a bowl. We're going to mix that with the pectin and mix with the whisk. Aside, we're going to put our apricots in the saucepan, the apricot puree, passion fruit puree, and the lemon zest or lemon peel. Let's turn this on and we take this mix to 40 degrees. Let's prepare the thermometer to check the temperature. And once we reach 40 degrees, we're going to add the sugar like this, very little by little.
vamos a llevar el conjunto a ebullición.
And we're going to take this to boiling point.
Lo que vamos a hacer es,
Once it starts boiling, we're going to add the gelatin.
por último, el ácido cítrico.
And lastly, the citric acid. Remember that the citric acid is the one that will activate the pectin. And this way, the pectin will gel the mixture.
Muy bien, pues ya está llegando a ebullición. Vamos a coger la parte de la masa de gelatina.
So this is reaching boiling point. So let's grab the gelatin mass, add it,
De elaboración.
and continue stirring.
Esta cantidad de ácido cítrico.
And lastly, this very small amount of citric acid.
Y ahora todo el conjunto lo hervimos. Perfecto. Vamos a colocar, ya tenemos nuestra elaboración, hemos preparado los moldes.
So this is done. We have prepared our molds.
Colocar la báscula y vamos
Let's
a
prepare the
colocar
scale.
el interior. Vamos a tarar y vamos a colocar. Perfecto. 200 gramos, 180 gramos de interior.
We're going to put 280 grams in each mold, approximately.
Perfecto. 180 gramos. Taramos otra vez.
All right, 180 degrees. That's what we want.
Colocamos. Nos sobra muy poquito en la olla. Siempre hacemos un poquito más. Pero 180 gramos de gelificado
And that's it.
de nuestra gelée.
So this is done. And now what we're going to do is take it to the blast freezer until it is completely frozen and continue with our next recipe.
Continuamos con la receta.
All right, let's continue with the recipe. And now we're going to make the glaze for our cake.
Receta interesante.
This is a very interesting recipe. It is made with praline and hazelnut paste. We have also added a little bit of cocoa butter. And we also have a little bit of dextrose, which will prevent our sugar from recrystallizing, and it will make it even sweeter.
Como una elaboración más dentro de la receta de la pastelería. Vamos a repasar los ingredientes.
Let's go through all of the ingredients. Liquid glucose, sugar, dextrose, milk chocolate, praline, hazelnut paste, cocoa butter, gelatin mass, neutral glaze, condensed milk, and a little bit of gold coloring.
Lo que vamos a elaborar es, vamos
So the first thing we're going to do now is turn off our induction plate,
el agua,
and we're going to put the water,
el
the
azúcar,
sugar,
la
the
dextrosa
dextrose,
y vamos a colocar la glucosa líquida.
and we're going to put the liquid glucose.
Vamos a colocar dentro de la olla y vamos a cocer este conjunto
And we're going to cook this
103 grados.
and
Por otra
reach
parte, vamos a colocar
103
la
degrees.
manteca de cacao,
Aside, we're going to put the cocoa butter, the milk chocolate,
pasta de avellana
our hazelnut paste,
y pasta y praliné,
and the hazelnut praline.
la jarra y bueno, vamos mezclando, ¿sí? Para fundir la glucosa. Y
So we must stir to melt the glucose, and it is very, very important that we reach 103 degrees.
en la cocción de nuestro jarabe. Súper importante para llegar a la concentración de los azúcares.
It is very important, so this way we are reaching the amount of sugar concentration and water that we need.
Una vez alcanzado los 103, 104 grados,
So once it gets to 103 to 4, we're going to put the gelatin mass, the neutral glaze,
leche condensada,
condensed milk,
que nos va a aportar también un sabor
which
láctico a
will
la receta.
provide the recipe with a very lactic flavor.
Y por qué no, ya también podemos introducir un poquito de colorante oro
And why not just put a little bit of gold coloring
y mezclamos. Y si nos damos cuenta,
and keep stirring. And if we noticed, now what we've got is two bases, the fat
y la parte,
and the liquid.
digamos, la parte que contiene agua. Fundimos.
Make sure it is completely melted and combined.
Vamos a colocar, siempre tengo papelitos aquí en el carro para apoyarme. Vamos a introducir
And let's put the liquid, half of it,
y con el mismo
in the
calor
measuring
que
jar.
tiene la olla,
And with the same heat that we're putting in with
el chocolate
the
y la
mix
manteca
that
de
was in
cacao,
the saucepan, it will melt
es una
the
especie de
chocolate.
ganache,
And now we're going to emulsify
con mucho cuidado.
this kind of ganache.
Y vamos a ir introduciendo vemos que glaseado
We can't start seeing this amazing glaze made with praline.
wow. Pues ya lo tenemos. Glaseado de avellanas y
So we've got our hazelnut and milk chocolate glaze.
retirar el turmix
So now let's just take the blender out
y vamos a colocar todo lo que quedaba en la olla.
and let's put the rest of the mixture that was in the saucepan.
Las paredes.
As always, use the spatula to make sure that there are no pieces stuck
Último,
on the sides of the jar.
mix que hemos recogido
And
las
once
paredes,
everything
todo
is
lo demás,
done,
vamos a dar un último repaso
we're just going to blend it out for the last time, just a little bit.
con el Bamix para homogeneizar ya toda la mezcla.
To make sure that everything is completely combined.
Muy bien, pues ya lo tenemos, perfecto. Así que recogemos bien
So that's it.
y perfecto. Pues con esto reservamos.
And just like
Lo mismo,
that,
6 horas.
let's just put it away for 6 hours at least. If we're not going to use it today, let's just put it in the fridge, covered up with cling film, and we're going to use it when it is at around 32 to 35 degrees. So I'll see you in the next recipe.
Continuamos con nuestra tarta.
Alright, let's continue with our cake, and now we're going to prepare
El montaje del gelificado,
the assembly of the gel with the cremant and the caramel. We've got everything ready. So the first thing, remember we had this namelaca right here,
cual vamos a colocar
which we are going to put
con cuidado
very carefully
del contenedor
in this bowl. Let's take it out of the container
muy suavemente,
and very slightly
crespo, suavemente.
we're just going to break it like this with a spatula.
A trabajarlo a una textura que quede
And we want a very creamy texture.
que no quede líquido.
It shouldn't be liquid.
Y una vez que lo tengamos a una buena textura, lo que vamos a hacer es colocarlo.
And once we get the texture that we want, we're going to put it in a piping bag to dose.
Muy bien, perfecto. Ya lo tenemos. Muy cremoso. Sobre todo. Perfecto. Pues muy bien, una vez ya hemos trabajado con nuestro cremoso, vamos a colocar
And once we're done with it,
caramelo en una
we're going to
bandeja.
put the caramel in a piping bag as well. Trying not to break the structure.
Vamos a colocar sin trabajarlo para que no se vuelva líquido.
Just don't work it too much because we don't want it to turn into liquid.
Una pequeña parte primero.
And for the namelaka, we're going to grab a small part first.
Perfecto. Vamos a colocar una melaca. Y primero
And first,
vamos a colocar todo bien organizadito. Y con la manga, cuando tú me digas,
and with the piping bag,
muy delicadamente
very carefully,
vamos a ir colocando.
we're going to start dosing small dots, like so.
Nuestra namelaca o cremoso de avellanas. Perfecto. Intentamos de cubrir todo el exterior con namelaca, ya que si
Try to make sure that all of the outer
un poquito más
layer
complicado
is
trabajar,
covered
la namelaca
completely.
va a congelar completamente. Así que le damos esa disposición de. Y ahora, caramelo.
And now the caramel.
Rellenando.
Making sure that you're filling all of the blank spaces.
Y con esto,
And with that, we have our interior with apricot, namelaka, cremant, and caramel.
para el montaje final de la.
So I'll see you in the next recipe. Let's continue with our cake recipe, and the last thing we have to do is the mousse for the recipe. Our ingredients are water, gelatin mass, praline, hazelnut paste, milk chocolate, and cream.
Vamos a explicar un poquito lo que
I will explain what we have done right here. We've got this rosemary infusion.
una cantidad de romero. ¿Cuántos gramos?
We want approximately 20-30 grams of rosemary, and the amount of water in the recipe. So first we boil the water, we pour it over the rosemary and we leave it to infuse for approximately 10 minutes. And this is what we will get. So after that, the first thing we're going to do now is grab some bowls, then put the rosemary water with the gelatin mass, and we are going to heat this up to 45 degrees. Aside, we're going to put the chocolate, we've got the infusion done. This is the water with rosemary and the gelatin. It is now at 42 degrees, that's good. So here we've got our chocolate, which we are going to melt and heat up to 40-45 degrees tops. Let's check the temperature of our chocolate. So let's just warm it up a little bit more. And for this it is very important that we check the temperatures. So the water should be at 40 degrees. Next thing, our chocolate. And we're going to take the blender to emulsify. And let's start blending it out. So let's just put a part of the water first. We're going to try to make the ganache with less water. And this is our ganache. And that's it, we've got this first part done. Let's just whisk a little bit our semi-whipped cream. Shouldn't be like a butter, it should be just semi-whipped. This is a point where we will get more volume. And the first thing, let's put 1/3 of the cream.
a igualar
And
la textura.
let's go get the texture that we want.
Espátula un poquito más grande. Y bueno, vamos mezclando. Suavemente, sin ser agresivos con la mezcla.
Don't be too aggressive,
Ya la segunda parte,
very smoothly. And now we can add the rest
decorar
of the cream.
la nata semimontada. Esto ya,
So now let's just add the rest of the cream.
un poquito, vamos a pasar la bañeta por la mesa, que la mesa siempre esté limpia. Y por último, suavemente, con este movimiento envolvente,
As always, clean your table and every tool that you're using. And like this, with this movement,
nuestra mousse. Suavemente,
we're gonna finish mixing and combining these
bien
ingredients.
incorporada nuestra ganache a la nata semimontada.
So once this is
Sin perder
completely mixed,
vamos a ir a buscar los interiores. Perfecto.
we're gonna go get the interiors.
Por aquí. Y ya tenemos todo preparado para el montaje de nuestra tarta. Entonces, lo primero, interiores, bizcocho.
And we've got everything ready to start assembling our cake.
Cascarón. Vamos a poner la primera cantidad de
So we've got our interiors, the sponge cake,
casi un cucharón y medio, más o menos.
let's put
Que tengamos.
the first amount of mousse on the base of the cakes.
Vamos a hacer una parte súper importante, que es subir las paredes de la mousse. Y esto lo que va a hacer, nos va a ayudar
And now we're going to
a agujeros
do this movement, which is very, very important.
a la hora de producir pastelería.
Just make sure that we soak and fill the walls completely.
Para no
This way we won't have holes on our base. This is a very important step
primero
in pastry.
colocamos un poquito más. Y ahora lo que vamos a hacer es interior con el caramelo y la namelaca.
We might want to add a little bit more.
O el albaricoque hacia arriba, lo vamos a colocar.
And now we're going to put this upside down
Y lo mismo, sacamos
with the caramel and the namelaca.
y lo llevamos. Muy bien. Y ahora colocamos mousse,
And just repeat the same process once again.
capa fina de mousse. Y ahora vamos a colocar nuestro bizcocho.
And now let's create another layer of mousse. Very thin layer.
Casi
And now we're going to put our sponge cake right on top.
18. Vamos a colocar. Retiramos todo el film. Revisamos que no nos vaya a quedar nada.
Remember, we used an 18 centimeter mold.
Perfecto, lo tenemos. bien hasta que suba la mousse. Y ya tenemos
Just press a little bit
con esto
and our cake is ready.
y la vamos a llevar.
And now let's take this to the blast freezer, and when it is frozen, I'll see you in a bit.
Continuamos.
Alright, let's continue with our cake, and what we're going to do now is take our cake out of the blast freezer.
Vamos a colocar, yo ya he desmoldado una tarta.
I have already unmolded one of the cakes.
Aquí para darle un poquito de altura, para que no entre la bandeja en contacto con la mesa y perdamos frío en el pastel. Y lo que vamos a hacer ahora es retirar el aro.
Let's put on some gloves.
Entonces vamos a dejar esto por aquí. Vamos a forzar un poquito, como el acetato va a salir solo.
And since we've got the acetate all around it, it's going to come out very easily,
Y ahora
as you've seen. And now,
el extremo del acetato que habíamos colocado y lo
let's remove it.
pasamos la mano por el canto. Sí, para matar un poquito, ¿no? Es que tenemos una arista que si lo glaseamos se nos va a quedar el pastel expuesto. Vale, y entonces ya lo tenemos, lo vamos a dejar en el congelador.
And we're going to take this back to the freezer, and then we're going to prepare the glaze.
Continuamos. Llegó el
So, it is time to make the glaze. We have our recipe done. You've seen that, and now we just heated up the glaze to 40-45 degrees. And I saved a little bit of cold glaze. So what I'm going to do first with the blender is just mix what we've got.
lo que tenemos. Y ahora vamos a ir añadiendo glaseado, que lo tenemos frío, digamos,
And now we're going to start adding the cold glaze.
dando la temperatura. Vamos a poner así a trozos.
This way we are balancing out the temperature.
Y lo vamos a refinar bien, intentando
We're going to blend this, trying not to add any air
glaseado,
inside the glaze.
controlar la temperatura. Y lo que queremos es esto, ¿no? Finalmente, llegar a la temperatura de unos 35.
And this is what we get. We want to get to 35 degrees.
Voy a quitar el turmix. Para esto me he preparado un poquito de papel para no ensuciar la mesa, así que quitamos el turmix. Voy a quitar también, voy a poner aquí frío, pero a su vez también voy a quitar un poquito del glaseado caliente y si me hace falta luego lo voy a repetir.
I'm also going to take out a little bit of the warmer glaze. So this way, if I need more temperature, I will just add that, and we're going to balance it out again.
Pues muy bien, bien refinada, la temperatura de 35 grados. Quitamos el turmix.
Alright, so we've got it. Let's take the blender out.
Con la espátula voy a quitar.
And I'm going to use the spatula to take these bubbles that I can't see there. And we are ready to glaze our cake.
A mover un poquito. Vamos aquí. Y vamos a traer ahora las tartas que teníamos en el mezclador y las vamos
And we're going to go get our cakes that we put in the freezer.
sacamos del congelador nuestras tartas. Las colocamos con mucho cuidado sobre la rejilla. Y ahora las vamos a glasear. Con la espátula bien limpia, glaseado desde el centro, por aquí, y glaseado desde el centro
And from the center out at 35 degrees.
laterales,
Then use the spatula to remove the excess from the top.
suavemente por nuestro pastel y dejamos que la grasa vaya cayendo. De abajo.
Let's go for the second one.
Nuestra espátula sutilmente y voilà, dejamos escurrir y esto súper importante, vamos a dejar escurrir
And that's it. We're gonna leave it
no se
there for a few minutes. You don't take your cake after glazing.
pastel directamente
You just leave it there
porque todavía
for a few minutes because the glaze needs to gel.
que lleva gelatina.
Remember, it's had some gelatin, and as you see, the glaze is still falling. So if I just took it and put it in the presentation cardboard, we'd have then this amount of glaze on our cardboard. So we're gonna leave it there for a minute.
Yo me voy a organizar por aquí. Vamos a coger una silpa y ya podemos
And we can appreciate how
verificando
the glaze is gelling now.
en un momento. Preparamos dos bases de pastel. Colocamos por aquí. Traemos un poquito hacia el centro. Qué color más bonito, ¿eh? Glaseado de avellanas.
Let's prepare two presentation cardboards.
Cuidado. Primero,
It's got an amazing color, this hazelnut glaze.
pasamos nuestro pastel de manera
And now very carefully, we're gonna take it like this.
colocamos
Then we rub it like this on a silicone mat and then to the presentation cardboard.
voilà. Ya tenemos nuestra primera tarta colocada en el cartón. Y ahora voy a buscar la segunda.
And voila, our first cake is there.
Dentro, meter la espátula y lo mismo, colocamos el pastel. pasteles.
Alright, so our cakes are ready for presentation. And we're gonna put them in the fridge. I will clean the cardboard a little bit.
Trabajar. Y los voy a colocar en una bandeja.
And I will put them on a tray
En la nevera para terminar la decoración
to finish the decorations.
de nuestro pastel. Continuamos con nuestro.
Alright, let's continue with the cake. And now we're gonna make
Hemos preparado una ganache montada.
the decorations. To do so, we have prepared a whipped ganache. You've got the recipe,
Pero primero tengo preparado
and
una bandeja.
we're gonna start whipping. But first, I've got this tray prepared with this 18 centimeter ring, and what we're going to do is just mark the interior like this. Let's grease it a little bit with some spray.
Poner 1 kilo. Y la vamos a.
Don't put too much.
Lo que quiero conseguir es que se pegue.
And we're going to turn it over, and what I want is that it sticks. This plastic layer, this plastic sheet, it should be stuck on the silicone mat. And the next thing we're going to do is put our whipped ganache in the mixing bowl.
Dentro de la batidora. Y montamos. Por otro lado, vamos a preparar una manga con una boquilla de
On the other side, we're going to prepare this piping bag with a 16 nozzle.
voy a recoger un poquito las paredes.
As always, I will use a spatula to make sure that everything is being combined.
Montando la ganache. La tengamos.
And let's just keep whipping.
Hacer una decoración muy
We're gonna make a crazy, beautiful decoration.
que tenga una buena estructura la ganache, ¿no? Voilà. Ya tenemos nuestra
And voila, this is our whipped ganache.
estructura. Y ahora vamos a colocar dentro de la manga.
Let's put it inside of the piping bag.
Con delicadeza vamos a hacer nuestra decoración. Vamos a colocar.
And let's start making our decorations.
Así. Y ahora vamos a colocar una hoja de guitarra suave,
Now let's put this guitar sheet on top,
un poquito, sin apretar mucho,
and let's press.
para ver cuánto apretamos.
Don't press too much. We just want to flatten them out. And that's it. And we're going to leave these to freeze, then paint, and then put it on our cake. Alright, let's continue with our cake. And let's go grab our whipped ganache, take it out of the freezer. So the first thing we're going to do is just take this plastic sheet off, remove it. We have also prepared some paint to paint those. And now with this white cocoa butter paint, we're just going to spray that all over our piece. It can be only cocoa butter with a little bit of white chocolate and a little bit of fat soluble white coloring. We want to get this velvety look, this velvety texture. Let's put a little bit more, and that's it. Then we're going to take a spray gun, just put it aside. And I will clean the gun, just empty it. And now I will put a little bit of black cocoa butter. I won't use too much pressure. And just create these dots on our decorations. After this, I'm going to take this back to the blast freezer. Just leave it there while we clean the table. And directly, we're just gonna go get our cakes, which, remember, we put them in the fridge. I'm gonna put on some gloves. And I will take the chocolate decoration that we made before.
buscamos el extremo, para cuadrarlo todo.
Remember, we made this decoration. Let's just search the tip
Voy a sacar
of the acetate.
recordamos una decoración de chocolate que habíamos hecho. A pie de nuestra tarta. Sí, siempre está muy bonito esto porque cualquier defecto.
It is always very good to use this type of decoration because if there are any mistakes on the base of the cake or any small details that might not look that good, you can just hide them with this.
¿Vale? Y lo que nos queda, voy a hacer un repasito hacia la mesa, es simplemente
And the last thing we've got to do
mi decoración, una espátula,
is go get our last whipped ganache decoration.
colocarla
And put it right here.
y para mí
And to me,
menos
less is more, as I always say.
que poner mucha cosa más, voy a recuperar un poquito de la pintura blanca.
We don't need to put too many things, but I always like to put
En el centro de la tarta.
a little bit of gold on top. Right on the center. So I can take my white paint that we used before, put one small dot in the middle, and then place the gold right on top.
Colocadito en el centro. Y también vamos a recuperar ya tenemos nuestra tarta
And that's our cake.
limpio, sin mucho más.
Very clean, very elegant.
Terminar tartas. Entonces voy a limpiar la mesa.
So I will clean the table. As always, make sure you're working on very clean surfaces.
Una de nuestras tartas a la cámara.
And look at this. Meet one of the most beautiful cakes. You can see the details of our hazelnut, apricot, and rosemary cake. Very simple, but very elegant. So, dear friends, this is done. So I'll see you in the next recipe.